Performing Gaming 420.
Nothing can compare to who could have been.
No, I don't care where you are geographically. Unless you're going to do like Ibsen or something. Like if you're going to do like a full play, then I'm up for that, but okay. How's it going?
Threats or danger. My question is, where does the fist of freedom of expression end and the nose of well-being of the individual or society begin? For example, in France and Germany, the nose has been defined by everything Nazi being illegal. Where do you think the American boundary should be? Should people have the right to be open Nazis, express their Nazism, and try to spread and recruit for a Nazi cause?
Okay, so as you can tell, I'm not a big fan of Nazis. Okay, that's my statement. I'm also a bigger fan, right, no, understood. I'm a bigger fan of the First Amendment. So my feeling is that in open debate, Nazis lose, which is why the Nazi Party is not a real thing here. So I actually oppose a lot of the hate speech laws because I think that once you give the government the power to decide which views are acceptable and which views are not acceptable, then that gun can turn on you in a real hurry, and that scares me a lot more than the idea of a couple of kooks walking around with silly-looking Hitler mustaches. Thanks.
Hey man.
How's it going?
Pretty good. Is it okay if I ask like
If they're brief, sure. I mean, big lines.
So my biggest disagreement with you is that when you talk about institutional racism, I know you pointed out that there are individual instances of racism.
Yes.
But I definitely do believe that there is institutional racism. The reason why I say that is because when you look at what the FBI released in 2006, when they said that white supremacists were invading police departments, or when James Cody essentially said that there is a history of minorities being targeted by the police, and he says, oh, history of minorities are not racist. And then you also look at Supreme Court rulings where they say that certain governments, state governments in the United States are literally with surgical precision trying to limit the African American and minority vote. It begs the question, like, how can you say there's no institutional racism when these institutions themselves are confessing that we're doing these things? And yes, they're being checked at times, but these things are happening.
Okay, so there are a couple separate questions there because there's specific data points that you're mentioning there. You know, the 2006 FBI report, and then you're mentioning also the Supreme Court decisions on the Voting Rights Act and the rewriting of the Voting Rights Act. So as far as the Voting Rights Act goes, there is not a lot of evidence to suggest that black votes are being undercounted in southern states. It's just the evidence is very scanty there. Justice Scalia's, I think he wrote dissent in that case. Actually, it would have been the majority opinion in that case because they struck down the VRA. Is pretty telling and has a lot of countervailing data on that, so it's worth reading. As far as the idea of institutional racism, so here's my general view about institutional racism. When I say that there are individuals inside, I'm not saying individuals don't exist inside departments. I'm sure that there are some cops who are racist. The question is, how do we fight, how do we fight racism? When we say institutional racism, the problem is there's no way for me to fight that with you because it's too vague. So if you say a particular institution is racist and then demonstrate to me the evidence that the institution is racist, not that it's badly policed, not that it's incompetent because there are police departments that are incompetent, but that there's actual motivated racism there, then we can do something about it and I'll stand right alongside you. But my problem is that when people say institutional racism, it seems to me a broad rubric under which they can subsume all complaints about American society or the cops. So you'll have situations where a black guy gets shot by the cops, and the first reaction is not, was the cop incompetent? It was the cop had to be racist because there's a white cop and a black guy. Right? And so what you've seen is the DOJ in some cases, like for example, Seattle Police Department, they'll say that there's institutional bias there, but then they'll provide no actual evidence of institutional bias. They'll just say a disproportionate number of black people were imprisoned or arrested by the police department. Well, Is it possible that a disproportionate number of black people were criminals in Seattle? Sure. I mean, that's actually what they found in 1994. They thought that there was institutional racism at the Highway Patrol in New Jersey. There's a federal case about it. And what they ended up finding, they did a study that they then tried to quash. And what the study found is that they were actually under-profiling black people, but there were just more black people speeding in New Jersey. So the point that I guess I'm making here is that I like when it's great that you're coming up and citing individual instances of data, and I want to look at each of those instances of data. I don't want to say that there's broad institutional racism in the United States, because you have to name to me the exact institution, and you have to name to me how it's spread throughout that institution, and it isn't just individuals within that institution, and then we can change it. Okay, so that's an institution that has racism. That's not the same thing as arguing there's institutional racism in the United States as a general rule, because that suggests that America is generally racist, which is something with which I disagree.
So, yeah, I might agree with you that there are certain cases in America that's not very racist. But then, in those cases where when we do discuss that racism in that institution, it's hard as a black person because you're then told that you cannot discuss this because you're calling out people like, when they start talking about white supremacists in these organizations, not to say that all cops are white supremacists, but they are there, like they are something where, like you said.
Right, and if you find the cop who's a white supremacist, again, I'm willing to stand by you. The problem is when you make blanket statements like there are cops who are white supremacists. I'm willing to say there are, but the percentage matters here. I mean, are we talking about 70%, or are we talking about like one guy?
Gotcha.
Right, so that I think is the big debate here. And so that's why whenever I have these conversations, I try to narrow it down to what's the most specific thing we can talk about that we can solve together. Because I promise you, I will go out there with you and protest against a racist shooting. Like when Walter Scott was shot in South Carolina, I'm on your side, right? I'm on the side of the person who was shot because that was a terrible shoot. Everybody saw that was a terrible shoot. But when people say that what happened in Ferguson, Missouri with Michael Brown, when they say that it was hands up, don't shoot, that's white racism, there's no evidence of that whatsoever, and that was actually an attempt to get a cop on the basis of really bad evidence. So I think that it's incumbent on us to actually show our work. Instead of just saying institutional racism, let's go out and protest, let's find the specific instance, and then we can solve it. Then we can solve the problem together.
Last question.
Yeah, sure.
So essentially, yeah, because just add on to that, like, so I do agree, but then oftentimes when you start protesting, when you start doing all these things, there is this general fear that there is this conversation where it's already looked at as a would delegitimized because they say, okay, African Americans are just going crazy, black people are just going crazy, and all these things. And it's hard to have dialogue.
I mean, if that happens, that's wrong. Yeah. I think that it depends on the nature of the protest. And my problem with the Black Lives Matter movement, as a general matter, to take an example, is that when you say things like Black Lives Matter, the implication is not the one that like other lives don't matter so much as it is the suggestion that there are a bunch of people, a broad swath of people in America who don't care about black lives. That's the implication, and I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I think that we all care about black lives, and I think that if the question were, what should we do about this particular shooting, that's one thing, but if the idea is that cops are shooting black people because black people are black people, I don't see any statistical evidence of a trend of that. So that's the problem with BLM. BLM tries to draw a trend from an anecdote. You want to protest the anecdote, I'll protest the anecdote with you. You want to protest the trend, you first have to identify to me statistically the trend exists.
So,
Great. Well, sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I appreciate it.
Okay. So yeah, I'll just finish off with this. So yeah, so I agree with, okay, so on the Black Lives Matter trend, yes, we do need to look at cases individually, and yes, we do need to, because sometimes there is this effect where you want to call racism immediately racism, and I agree with you, that's wrong. But I'm just saying that I feel like sometimes it becomes counterproductive when constantly when people are trying to defend these things, when people are trying to find these things, and automatically the conversation is shaped in such a way that where these far alt-right extremists or then far out-left extremists trying to...
Right, and I think that the biggest problem when it comes to language, and I'll finish with this, sorry, but
yeah.
I think that the biggest problem there is, as you notice, I keep trying to peg down as exactly as we can the instances that we're talking about and the language that we're referring to. And I think that movements have a hard time pegging that down. And you see that from movements all over the country. When you make a claim as broad as American society doesn't care about the lives of black people, Black Lives Matter, a lot of people are going to get pissed at that, and I think they have a right to be pissed at that. Thanks.
Hi, Ben. I wouldn't characterize myself as a member of the left, but I do have a couple of pointed questions. Mr. Shapiro, while I disagree with many of your conclusions, I admire your dedication to and insistence on the primacy of facts in public discourse. You've said and recently retweeted that, quote, you become a member of the left when you say that truth is not a value. Would you characterize President Trump as a leftist?
I would characterize President Trump's approach to truth as leftist, yes.
Okay.
Yes, his approach to truth is leftist, because I think that, I mean, as many of you know, I'm not a Donald Trump sycophant. So I think that I try to call it balls and strikes with him. He does some things that are good, some things that are bad. I think his approach to truth is scanty, shall we say. And so, yeah, I think that he thinks truth is relative. And my biggest problem with Trump is this. I like when he bashes the media because the media don't tell the truth. But if you're going to do that, you have to replace the not truth with truth. You can't replace the not truth with more not truth.
Do you think this problem is contained to Donald Trump or has spread to the Republican Party at large?
I mean, it's a real concern for me. I wonder that there are a lot of people who defend things that Trump says that are not actually true, as true just because Trump said them. And I think that there's a lot of team sport in politics right now that's very reactionary and and a big problem. I think that if people see politics as, he's my guy, therefore anything he does is okay, and this existed for Obama for sure, and I think it also exists for President Trump. I think it exists for most political leaders. It is your obligation as a citizen to determine for yourself what is true and what is false. You do not follow the leader. Okay? Be a human being, be a citizen, and be an adult. You're not a child. You don't need a politician to lead you by the hand. Check your own facts, decide what's true, and then call it like you see it.
Along similar lines, how do you picture the future of facts in political discourse, given the trends toward dishonest definitions of terms like racism and wealth inequality on the left, and the rise of alternative facts and outright lies that, to your credit, you called out frequently on the right?
Okay, so I think that my hope is that there will be enough young people who actually care about truth, that the reaction to what is a post-truth society, a post-fact society, this was a post-fact election. You had Hillary Clinton, who's a pathological liar on one side, and Donald Trump, who's a congenital liar on the other. So, and I said this during the campaign openly, which did not make me popular with some folks on my own side. I think that there will be a reaction where people demand the truth from their leaders, or we can just hunker down in our various bubbles, and people on the right will believe what people on the right want to believe, and people on the left will believe what people on the left want to believe, and we'll never be able to talk with each other. Because it's one thing for us to agree on a set of facts and then disagree about the conclusions to draw from those facts. It's a lot more dangerous when we can't even agree what the facts are. And right now, there's not even basic agreements on what the facts are, and a lot of purposeful vagueness from our politicians doesn't help the problem, and opportunism in political discourse doesn't help the problem. Just a quick example, and then we'll move. And that is, to take an example, Donald Trump over the weekend on Friday night, he said that his exact wording was something like, there was something terrible happened in Sweden last night. Sweden has been inundated with immigrants, and that's really done terrible things for crime. It's not an exact quote, obviously, it's a paraphrase. So with the left centered on something terrible happened in Sweden last night, and they said he was talking about a terrorist attack, and he's a liar. And the right centered, and then the left went one step, okay, so he shouldn't have made a reference like that because it wasn't clear what he was referring to. That's true. Then the left went one step further, and they said there's no problem in Sweden. And then the right went, whoa, wait, hold on a second. There is a problem in Sweden, and he's totally right about the second half of that statement. So instead of people holding these two thoughts simultaneously in their mind, that Trump shouldn't have said something happened in Sweden last night, and also there's problems in Sweden. The right goes, there's problems in Sweden, and the left goes, there was no terrorist attack in Sweden, nothing's happening in Sweden. And this is how you end up with the two sides screaming at each other like banshees and nothing happens.